So yeah, thanks everyone for joining the next edition of the live Series Roundtable events. Very pleased today to be joined by four engineering leaders from all different parts of Denmark with a range of different backgrounds and experiences. So I'll give everyone a really brief introduction and then I'm going to ask them to give a little more of a detailed kind of intro on themselves as well. The topic we're going to be covering today is how to keep engineers engaged. So up first, we have Ligia Gaspar, who is just joined family as an engineering manager. We have Alberto, who is currently the head of engineering at Spirii. Frederik is the development manager over at Dalux. And last but not least, Rune, who's most recently CTO at Montio. So, Rune, I came to you last there. I'll ask you to do the first intro, if that's okay.
That's perfectly fine. Hi, I am Rune. I'm a dad of two kids. I am a nerd, as you can probably tell from the background. I'm a computer scientist, and I've been doing tech since about 98. The past 10 years, I've been doing tech leadership, working in fintech sector. That's the very short version of me.
Amazing. That's cool. We'll get some more detail, I'm sure, as we go through. Frederik, how about you?
Sure. My name is Frederik. I'm also a computer scientist as Rune, from Copenhagen University. I think it's the same for Rune. I have been a developer all my life, even before I started. And then lately, the last 3 years, I've been in Dalux as a development manager. Wasn't the title we had before I started, but we've been growing a lot and then sort of had to shape the role. And now I think we are 9 development managers, something about that. And then, yeah, I have 2 kids. I'm a huge nerd, play role-playing games, all that stuff. Yeah, I just.
Nice. Sounds like you and Rune could be best friends after that. After all this, lots in common.
I think we have overlap at KU, I guess. So.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. Alberto, we'll come to you next. How about you?
Yes. So yeah, I'm Alberto. I'm from Ecuador and living in Denmark for the past 2 years and a half. Love and work brought me here to Denmark. Now married to my Danish now wife. I started my journey 20 years ago as a software engineer, but moved quickly to project management and team leadership, and then most recently became head of engineering here at Spirii, and I'm mainly responsible for connecting our teams with the business side and while scaling and overseeing our people and process efforts in the department.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And last but definitely not least, Ligia, how about yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Ligia. I'm from Romania, but I've been living in the Nordics for 11 years now, a few years in Finland and now a few years in Denmark. I also started off as a software developer and I'm a computer scientist with my studies in Romania, though not in Denmark, like you guys. And for the past more than 5 years now, I've been switching into the leadership side of things. I just joined family yeah, I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Thank you very much. Yeah, me too. Hopefully it'll be a good one. And we'll get straight into things. So now that we've all got a bit more of a background on who everyone is and your current positions. So the topic today, as I mentioned, is all focused around how you keep your engineers engaged. So everyone in this call, in this meeting, is either at the moment or has recently been involved in engineering leadership in terms of managing a team of engineers. And one thing that I always find really interesting when it comes to helping companies hire and speaking to leaders about their problems, and one thing that came up a lot when I went to Copenhagen earlier this year was trying to keep your engineers kind of on side while things aren't as exciting as possible. If you're a startup or a scale up that's got a huge backlog of greenfield projects, loads of exciting things to do, it's quite an easy sell, right? If you're in a position where maybe things are just about to go into maintenance mode, or there's something that's going to prevent them from doing what they want to do. I want to kind of get your views on what you can do as a manager or a leader to make sure that those people remain engaged. I guess one thing that I wanted to clarify, and probably the best place to actually start, is at what point do you speak to your engineers and say, look, there's going to be something coming up? It might be that things are going into a maintenance kind of part of a project, or maybe you know that somebody doesn't like doing a certain type of work and that's coming up, and they're going to have to be involved in it. What's your approach to that conversation? How do you actually go about letting your team know that that's going to happen?
Maybe I can start.
Absolutely.
I actually would hope that in the way we work, that I wouldn't have to sit down the team and tell them that this is going to happen, that this will be obvious to them from the beginning. So every single project will have a maintenance piece to it, and the project is not done as long as users are still using it, whatever piece of the domain of the software that we're building that falls into. So from my point of view, this comes a lot with the way we work and how transparent the planning and the work that we do is, and how much the engineers are involved in the scoping, the discovery, and all the other stages of a project. So I would expect them to be aware that a certain project is coming to that part. Now, of course, it could be that you have new engineers that join, or that it's a legacy piece of software and you are being put as an engineer into a team that mostly deals with maintenance, which has actually been my case when I joined as a developer a long time ago. And there are a lot of ways of making that very clear from the beginning. But I would say my first thought on this is I would hope that it's not a surprise.
Yeah, I guess it's like you say, it's part of the process, isn't it? You'd expect that at least someone with a little bit of experience behind them should know that it's coming up. And like you say, it should be planned as well if it's going into that stage. But what about if it's something that, maybe they've had a leaver in the team, or there's kind of a reason why somebody has to make a move into a slightly different part of a project. Let's say somebody's having to do a little bit of DevOps work and it's not really something they particularly enjoy doing. How would you kind of go about that conversation to say, we need you? It's open to the floor now, by the way, if anyone wants to jump in.
I just want to continue from now. Let's see if I can pronounce it correctly. Ligia, all right. As position that as long as people are engaged at all parts of the process, from discovery to operations, they know what's going on, and it's also their project. And usually, you will be delegating part of that responsibility to a team that knows what's going on. So in that context, you usually do what is required at the moment. And of course, if you are talking about a year-long commitment, then a plan needs to be done. But if it's the usual, it might be boring for 3-6 months, then most people just deal with it if they own what they build.
I think there's a large difference in whether you're dealing with a junior developer or a more seasoned veteran, right? Somebody who's been in 2 or 3 places and had maybe a career of 5-8 years is definitely a different approach than if it's a junior developer. So for junior developers, you kind of have to start out by saying that this is the real world. You have some passion you want to do, like maybe greenfield development, or especially like that part of React, or you have a stack you love. But in fact, you get most work is like 20% of your passion, and then the 80% is a meeting, writing summaries of the meeting, and all these things are part of development, and also maintenance, DevOps work, operations work can be part of development. And that's about reality adjustment for new people sometimes. For more seasoned people, I expect them to be aware of the importance of the work they're doing. And here it's also about finding the right fit. Some people are really good at slapping together a prototype, doing greenfield development. They should not be on maintenance work, perhaps. But some people are really good at taking the stuff that just needs that last 20%, which is actually 200% of the work, and running with that. Some people are mentors and some people are makers, and both roles are needed. It's a little easier with seniors, but then for the juniors, you have to sort of talk about the distinction, right? Yeah, you can do greenfield development. It's over here. If you want to do something more, I don't know, impactful, powerful, revenue generating, we have some legacy stuff for you over here that needs operations.
Yeah, I think I was reflecting on depending on the organization you are in terms of if you work in a consultancy that is running project after project, or if you are more in a company that has a product that maybe some features will come into a maintenance phase, but then you have other new features already coming in. And depending on what kind of organization, then you would do different things, because if it's, for example, a company that is more of a product, then you can rotate people and taking turns on maintenance and stuff like that. But to me, at the end of the day, it comes down to really knowing the people that you work with, because when you know their what are the main needs that they have, or what are the things that drive them. So, for example, we could talk a lot about if there's the need of belong, or to grow, or to solve interesting problems, or make an impact in the company, or do something that is relevant in society. You know, all of these things, or even the need of impart wisdom or nurture others' growth, for example. So I think that we as managers can start using these things in a good way to understand where they are at, and being able to accommodate some things around that. So, for example, some of them, in my experience, they just need to be heard and seen, and they just need to be acknowledged. Hey, you're going through a season of maintenance. It might be a little boring, but they just need to let it out the chest and be acknowledged and be heard and seen that, yeah, that's what you're going through for the next season, and that's okay. Maybe we can in the meantime, we can start growing into other areas that you will need in the future, in the next few months after that. You know, so there's some tactics or strategies that we can use as managers, but it all comes down what is the level of that we really know them as people, as persons, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. And especially like at the start when you mentioned, about like a consultancy or a digital agency, that is, if someone is really that against maintenance work, or not even necessarily maintenance work, but just a slower part of a project, that's probably where you should go, right? And then even then you've got to consider it, because a lot of consultancies will work on things for years on end. There's going to be maintenance and slower parts of projects, legacy work involved there as well. But I think the final point there as well from Alberto, just about kind of making sure that people have their opinions heard and having like an open discussion with them is something that's really important. It's not going to last forever. It might be that you have to do this for 3 months, but then I guess I'm keen to hear what the people think about this. But seeing that, let's say we're in June now, but in September we've got this project coming up, and I want you to do X, Y, and Z at that point. But for now, this is where I need you. Is that kind of a conversation that people tend to have with the people in their team if something like this comes up? Is that how you would normally handle it?
Yes, but it sounds like a very reactive approach. Usually you would have the feel of how they would want, where they want to go, the context of their 3-year plan, whatever, and what they want to learn. And some people have a very clear idea where they want to be headed in a year or 2 or 3 or 5, and what kind of skills they want to acquire. And other people are perfectly content with where they are, or just floating, or just delivering value to the clients. And so it really depends on the person, but it really shouldn't come as a surprise.
Interesting. And just out of interest, how would that come up in the recruitment process for you when you're actually first speaking to this person, or is it something that you kind of calculate over time after working with someone for a few months?
Wouldn't know a person at the end of an interview process. Couldn't tell. I would need to understand who they are. Of course, I have a very particular profile in mind when I hire, but I do not know those persons before I've worked with them for, let's say, half a year.
I do think when we recruit a bunch of people in Dalux the last many years, and we make it explicit to set the engagements right. Yeah, you have a bunch of legacy stuff. These are our challenges. These are the maintenance work that's ongoing. This is updating .NET. All these things that are ongoing and that aren't the sexy tasks. So as not to disappoint. And we make a point of course, following up after a week and a month and 3 months. Like, did your expectations, were they met? Did we all promise? Did we under-deliver? So I think, as Rune said, it's not good to get in a reactive stance where suddenly you have a maintenance project and nobody was telling anybody that they had to do maintenance. And the last thing about being proactive is, why aren't they seeing the value of this, right? Is it an organization that values these things? Are they applauded? Are they rewarded when you take these initiatives? If you show what you value in the organization, most people will step up. And then it's just a matter of finding the right candidates, but people will step up if you show as an organization we value these things. If you only value greenfield development or closing that customer as a consultant or whatever, then of course people don't want to do maintenance.
I want to also put a few words on the recruitment side of your question. And I've been in family now for just 1 month, and I've already hired 2 people. So it's been a very short intro for me, but I can see one thing that is different here that I love, and I haven't seen before in any of the other companies that I've been a manager in, and that is a really interestingly done, very well done career framework for engineers that we are very transparent with during the recruitment process. So I have sent a PDF of this Notion page that we have about our engineering career framework that talks a lot about alignment and expectations, and not specifically a career ladder, but a path, and what are some of the values that we expect from people, and how, where do they find themselves for them to think about it, and also how we place them at what level of seniority based on these values, which is a bit more of a complex maybe than just the classic, junior, regular, senior. We have a bit more of a more comprehensive way of looking at this that incorporates also some other qualities. And I think that also can help with this. You can see where that person is. Another thing that has been interesting for me is the manager reference that we ask from developers, from their previous managers. I've actually taken note of everything I received as a reference, because some of their previous managers that did answer to our reference call actually wrote about these people and how they performed before, and how, what they think they should improve on. And I'm going to be a new manager, I don't know this person, of course, it's very little I have learned about this person through the interview process, but I'm going to take that as an input, and I'm going to start from there when we start talking in one-on-ones about where do you want to go next, and how do you want to develop yourself in this company. So there are ways of doing it, but I think transparency is very crucial, like you also mentioned, making clear what exactly you expect them to work on and what type of work we have in this team and in this product domain that we're working with.
Amazing. I really like that as well. I think having that kind of progression framework on show straight away is such a big thing. Like I say, when it comes to transparency, just letting people know. I spoke to a couple of people actually about this, and having a mixture of like cultural and technical kind of frameworks along the way. So it's not just you're really good at this skill and that skill, or this framework, whatever it may be. It's that, you contribute to team projects, and you conduct yourself well in the office, and things like that, which, because you can be the best developer in the world, but if you're not a nice person to be around, then nobody's going to want you in the team. Nobody's going to want to see you progressing. So no, I really like that. And I think one thing that we've kind of clarified already is that kind of giving people the vision and giving people like a transparent view of what it's actually going to be like to work at your company and work in your team is probably the most important thing, right? In terms of kind of having your cards on the table straight away. One thing that I'm keen to hear about is if you're in a situation where you know that for the next, let's say you've planned your roadmap for the next 9 to 12 months, and you're looking at it going, well, I know what needs to be done, but nothing, here is particularly exciting. Like nothing here is, really kind of eye-catching. There's nothing particularly new going on. It's just that we need to get this stuff done. But you need to bring people into that team. How would you go about kind of selling that opportunity to somebody, or finding somebody internally to do that? What would your kind of approach be as a manager?
In my opinion, or my experience, I tend to not look for somebody that perhaps is too keen on to learning new technologies all the time, but it's more about perhaps having an impact or conquering something, achieving something. So because then that drive will make the project a success, because it will be their own success as well. They will drive it, So that this is where, and I agree with Rune that you cannot know somebody fully in the interview process, but they definitely can at least try to spot what are the major drivers for the person, right? So you can definitely spot when somebody needs a lot of structure around, or can they actually flow in a more chaotic environment, or in those things, right? So to me, it's important that if we have that scenario that you are mentioning, Jamie, then we try to recruit a person that is wanting to achieve something. So there's a main driver for them. So that's how I would sell it personally.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, because a lot of people that I've spoken to, in the past, sometimes they will look at somebody and say that they don't seem overly ambitious, or they don't look like they kind of want to progress as much. Whereas based on what you're saying, it might actually be that they're that profile of person where they're a fixer, or they're a problem solver, and that's kind of where they get their kicks, right? That's what they get their career happiness from. Yeah, that's what they want to do. Any kind of advances on Alberto there in terms of how you go about that kind of a situation internally?
I absolutely agree for hiring for people that want to achieve stuff. And that might be, at the end of the day, we're there to deliver value. Have somebody use the stuff we are building, no matter what it is. And people that are driven by that can make APIs for 3 months without crying about it. They usually just build a script and render it from some metadata or something like that, right? If you are in the situation where you know what you want to do for 9 months, I've never tried that. Then you usually have a lot of time to figure out a smart way to do it in a lot less than 9 months. But hiring the people that are there to solve interesting tasks. I actually don't care about technology stacks when I hire. It's about what people have tried to be doing. So even if I come from a .NET background, I have never had a problem with hiring people from other tech stacks, as long as they know the architecture and technology and show drive.
I think it's also the connection to value, like you said. I think both of you mentioned that in a way. So everything we do has to bring some value, and it's about how we frame that when we plan, when we look at the tasks that come in the roadmap in front of us, and how we communicate about that inside the team. Of course, it depends, again, what type of product you have. Is the product company, how your teams are managed and how they're split? Do you have a matrix organization, or do you have a product domain or feature-based teams? Do you have only backenders or only frontenders in a team? I think these kind of things might matter as well a little bit. But I think about communication of value and how the value flows through the company, inside engineering and outside of it, to communication with product, how close the developers are to customers. The closer they are, the closer you can get them there, the more they understand about the value they deliver, either to a customer directly, but sometimes it's those boring projects usually are delivering something to another system or internally or to the business in some way. I'll give an example. In a previous company, we were doing an integration with Citibank, and that was really, really boring work for the developer, the tech lead that was involved in that. It was meetings, and it was weird XML stuff, and it was strange, and he didn't like it. But the value that brought to our business, the opportunities that those opened up were huge. So, and he was in on that. He had discussions with product and with the business side, and we talked about that, and he knew what was at stake, and he was motivated by that, even though the work itself was a bit boring. But he knew that once that is done, that will be amazing for the team, so and in general for the business. So yeah, I think the motivation needs to come from these type of things and not as much the stack. There are those developers that are very motivated about the tech stack that they work with. They can get some of their kicks also from chapters. We have a backend chapter and a front-end chapter, and meeting with other people from that area in the company, cross teams, discussing how they can improve things, how they can learn together, how they can run some background refactoring projects and things like that. That could also be something to keep them motivated while they're doing some boring work on the product side.
Awesome. And sorry, Alberto, are we going to jump in there?
Oh yeah, just really agree with that. And maybe one thing I want to share is that here at Spirii we are trying with using frameworks like OKRs, for example, to make it more visible. This kind of maintenance or more, for example, more reliability or stability or scalability kind of projects that might feel a little technical or a little boring, but by connecting them to key results and objectives, we all understand the value of them. It's not only the developers that know what does it mean, but the whole company understand that by solving these technical problems, we are actually having a huge impact in the business. So it just makes it more visible and therefore more relevant, and therefore the developers that don't feel that it is maybe boring, but at least they understand the impact what they're conquering by addressing those things.
Yeah, and that's a massive point that you both raised there, and I think it's something that even I guess outside of software development is a thing, right? There's always going to be things within your role. I think Frederik, maybe you referenced it before, like only 20% of your role is going to be stuff that you enjoy, which is true. But I think
all professions are like that.
Exactly, I can 100% relate to that, I promise you. But I think it's really important that you've got that, and like you say, when there is the things that aren't as fun, they're not as exciting, they're not as shiny, it's really, really key that you show people what the value is that they're bringing to it. I think one of the things that, like, personally as a manager, I've always been very conscious of is that I don't want to, if someone comes to me and says, why are we doing things this way? My response can never be, well, that's, either because I said so, or because this is just how we do it, or you need to have a reason for it. And I think that's a massive thing. You need to be able to give people a reason as to why this small part of what we're doing is a huge cog in that wheel, so to speak. And I guess we can touched on it briefly before when Ligia was talking about career progression frameworks. But I guess how important is something like a progression framework, whether you have one that's in written form like they do at a family, or whether it's something that's more kind of in the back of your mind? How do you kind of use those when it comes to, regular one-to-ones or reviews with your engineers that maybe aren't enjoying their work as much as possible? Like, what do you kind of, how do you position those conversations when it comes to career progression within your business?
We don't use an explicit tech ladder or career progression framework in Dalux today. We have individual contributors, team leads and tech leads. We have development managers and some VPs, and that's about it. So it's not very advanced. We tend to view the career progression as more organic. We like a really flat structure where a developer who's been there for 10 years is a developer who's been there for 10 months is a developer. So that gives some advantages, but then you have to address progression in a different manner. And what I found useful is to talk about how they want to manifest their seniority in different ways. So you can manifest your seniority in the form of just larger output, just do more stuff than the others, right? Just bang out more code. You can manifest your seniority in mentoring and coaching and actually being the one who enables the team to have a larger output. And you can manifest your seniority in being the kind of front runner that isn't afraid to run out and at the edges and find a new framework, discover a new technique, or maybe come back and say it doesn't work, right? All of these things are very senior things to do. You can expect them from junior. It comes with a progression. So asking the person what kind of Like, do you want to be a project leader? Are you going to be good at documenting? Do you want to teach? How do you want to manifest your seniority? I think it's more important than how do you reach senior principal, architect, solution programmer, whatever, right? So that's what we do in Dalux mainly.
Awesome. Really like that. Has anyone else got something similar to that, where they've got something that's maybe, like you say, not like a classic career progression framework, but something that follows a similar ilk to what Frederik mentioned?
I think here at Spirii, it's been very similar in terms of we've been a startup first. We only are in the market 4.5 years. So it's been very fluid. It's been full of people that can wear different hats, and that's been very exciting, very motivating also, and learning curve for all of us in that way. And now we're scaling, so now I may need to shoot a message to Ligia and have her sharing with me some ideas. I'm curious about that. But we are right now in the process of making it more clear, making it more structured, because also that's a feedback that we've got from our people, that they are needing more structure. So fortunately, our churn has been very minimal, so I'm actually really happy about that. But now we are entering in the season when we may see some churn coming up. So of course we are taking some measures to also address the things that we need to structure around. So that's been the reality. But of course, since it's been a bit more fluid in a way, that's been a great tool for us to retain people, in terms of acknowledging that we are a young company that can create some opportunities for people that maybe are not fully there, not 100% there, but that have all the ambition to it and the drive for it, and then they grow into those positions. And that's also a bit of the startup vibe as well, right? And we've actually leveraged from that and create an environment where people actually have grown into the positions they are at now.
Just want to quickly add that exactly what you said. What we're doing in family is, for each level or each seniority level, we have these 3 categories. Are you learning? Are you comfortable? Are you thriving? So you can, promote people, or, people can reach certain levels on potential, like, and then you're learning how to be in that role and what that role means for you. And as you said, how you manifest that seniority. You're already in that role for a while, you're very comfortable, you're performing great, everything's great, and then you go that extra mile, you're thriving. So that's already a sign for me as an engineering manager that it's time for you to get higher up, or to give you more challenges and to put you for a promotion. So there are these other levels inside. So it's not just like, okay, you have a person that was junior and now they're going for senior or whatever that means, but it's also where they are at in that and what it means for them. And that has been, I saw it being something really interesting. And when it comes to how we use it in one-on-ones and so on, I do love to talk about this quite often with the people in my teams. And it's mostly around goals and around what they want from their career progression, what they want to try next, what they feel they want to talk about related to that. Some people are very comfortable with some topics and others not. For example, we have some staff engineers, and I think we're still learning what that actually means at family, what it means to be a staff engineer, what we expect from them, and there are different flavors of it as well. And talking a lot about mentoring and coaching for the younger engineers. And that is something that these are skills that a lot of developers don't get to maybe try as much of until they reach a certain level of seniority. So, yeah.
Amazing. I appreciate that. And I think it's, like you say, it's massive to like have those different opportunities, because yourself and Alberto both mentioned that you've done software engineering, then gone into product, and then into leadership. It's not a one size fits all kind of straight road, right? In terms of what people do, you don't go from just being a junior engineer to a CTO. There's different forks in the road, right, that you can take. And I think having that kind of ability to assess that internally is huge. Runa, sorry, I know you were going to jump in there as well. So what were you going to add to that?
I wanted actually to jump in after Frederik, but I appreciate that I got to go last year. So I've also not been using a formal framework in any way. And also I've not been using any titles that you can advance to. You're at the company and you do stuff. And surprisingly, this has worked really well for a lot of people, giving them ownership and also the responsibility to move in the direction that they want to. And I've guided that by having, of course, I have a mental system, and it's also in writing somewhere in my notes, but having the PDR, asking the different questions like Ligia gave an example of here, but basically just variations of how are you doing, do we care, things like that. And that can really clearly paint a picture of how people are doing and how they feel they are developing and where they want to go. And then for someone, I will follow up with, okay, so what are our goals for next year? What do you want? I would like this, or I see this, or we could go this direction. And then I can use that as a baseline or a reference point for one-on-ones, and it doesn't have to be repeated every month or whatever the frequency is, but get back to it once or twice between the yearly meetings to see if we are on the right path, or if something needs to be adjusted, or if I need to take more action, or vice versa. But it's all of it is individual. None of it fits into a career ladder or title framework.
That's really interesting. And when you talk about kind of the first part of what you mentioned there about not having job titles, it's more like, you know, this is your role within the company, and this is kind of how it fits into what we do as a wider team. Is that a decision that you would make based on someone's experience, or would that be a discussion with that person to say, this is what we think you should do?
I would usually be hiring for a specific role. The generic one being full stack engineer.
Okay.
That can do everything, but basically heavy duty SecOps. But on that scale, a lot of full stacks actually understand the infrastructure they're using. They can easily figure out how their cloud provider works and how their build system works, and do a bit of front end, do a bigger back end, but everyone have a preference, and people tend to go or to gravitate toward what they like doing or what kind of problems they like solving. And that's not so hard to uncover when you talk with people.
Perfect.
So if I was sitting with an exceptional person that didn't feel what I had in mind right now, I would very strongly consider to hire for another need I had or could see that I would have soon.
I think it's important to stress that even though it can seem a little like anarchic or chaotic, or this called organic, to not have a well-developed career framework, it's not that it absolves you from progressions and developing your reports, right? It doesn't mean that, okay, I can just lean back as a manager and now we don't have titles. That'll be fine. To the contrary, it requires you to be explicit about like where you're going, where you want to be. You almost have to provide the substitutes. So I've been in previous organizations with a very well developed, to say the least, career ladder, with very well, like pages and pages on what it means to be a principal developer and a project lead and all kinds of stuff. And in my view, it was difficult to make it match reality, right? You have these things, you hold them up against a person, and it's just, well, I'm also doing these things. Why am I not 2 levels higher or like, yeah. So I'm definitely curious on how it works in family. I think it, of course, has merit, but just to say, it's not that we then wash our hands of all kinds of progressions and development. Yeah, find out.
No, it's good to know though. It's difficult. Sorry, Ruud, I'll let you jump in there because you're going to go then. My bad.
No, I just wanted to second that. We need another talk where Ligia tells us about how it works at family, but I'm also really interested in, because in my mind, it's I like structure, but it also sounds very rigid. And I've seen other companies where these explicit career ladders, also when you start tying it up to how much equity are you getting, what kind of bonus programs can you enter, where it becomes a competition to advance the career ladder or be at a specific title. And that part I really loathe, because it has a downside, and it's commonly seen that people will tie the title up to the compensation.
And we don't do that at Family. And that's what I wanted to just say, that we don't do that. And we make it very clear that this framework is more about how we want to evolve the culture in engineering, and how we can align and create transparency over expectations versus impact, about how you develop your craft, also how you develop culturally inside the team. So combining some of these more, let's say, explicit structural things that we expect, of course, for certain levels of progression in engineers, but also with the culture behavioral things that we want to see, and it is a ever evolving thing, so it's not set in stone. It's actually a one-pager thing. It's not a very, very long one, but we do use it as a basis for communication. So it's meant more like that, and it's not. I have been also in companies in corporate where things are very, very overly explicit, and it's very tied to the compensation, whereas here it's not. So
Awesome. Well, that's good to hear. But I think it's definitely like a follow-up conversation, because it's definitely caught people's attention, which is a good thing. One thing I was thinking about just on the progression framework as well, it's not necessarily families. I haven't seen it myself, so I can't comment on it. But coming back to the original point about, you know, keeping people engaged and making sure that basically people are happy within their jobs, right? How easy is it, or how difficult is it to make sure that, let's say for example, that you have a technical part in this framework that says, you know, you display X, Y, and Z skill set really well, and it's a technical, you know, it's a front end framework, or it's a software development language. If there's not a project going on right now, or in the next kind of 3 to 6 months that's planned, how do you then go about analyzing whether somebody can do that or not, and would that then hold them back from being promoted or moved into a different area? How would you kind of go about making sure that that isn't going to be a barrier to people? I'll come away from Ligia on this one, because I don't want to make it seem like it's all just about family, and I don't want to pick holes in your plan, because it sounds amazing. But maybe Alberto or Frederik, have you got anything to kind of put on that? How would you kind of build something that fits?
Well, we're luckily absolved from that because we don't have that
I guess so.
framework.
I guess so. Yeah.
I think normally what we will see, and what I've seen before that works, is you promote after the fact. It's just a lot easier to formalize what is already informally the thing, right? So somebody shows up and they consistently display a knack for, I don't know, documentation, or they always take the hardest UX tasks, or they really do the meetings and the project leadership. Then after that has manifested itself for some time, they're promoted into the role, and then you're sure they're going to be a good fit, and not being promoted into failure, right? That's always nice if you can do it that way. The situation where you have promotions coming up in 3 months and there's no way to manifest, are no criteria 5 on the list of the 6 things required to progress to level 3. Yeah, I guess that's why all 4 of us want to avoid that kind of maze, right? I don't even know how it works in organizations that do that stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine it causes a few rifts. So definitely one to try and avoid. I think just kind of going back over what we've covered already, I think for me personally, I don't know whether anyone would add to this, but the 2 kind of key takeaways I've seen, kind of relating back to the initial point, the first one is just to be transparent and be honest with people. You know, if you've got things coming up that aren't going to be fun, you've got things coming up that maybe you know someone really well within your team doesn't like doing a particular side of things, but they might have to do it. Then the second part is making sure they understand why that's important and what the value they're going to add to the business is, and why them being able to do that is such an important, you know, part of them being part of the team and the wider business. So I think they're the 2 kind of main things I've picked up on today. I wanted to kind of put it out to the floor as well. Has anybody had any kind of situations, within their team where they've had like somebody who's approached them within their team and said, I'm not particularly happy about having to do X, Y, and Z, or, maybe at first they were happy doing a particular project and they've got 2 weeks into it and gone, actually, this really isn't for me. I'm really not enjoying it. And how did you kind of go about resolving that, and what was the outcome, I guess?
Yes. Can I just jump back to Frederik's description before, because I think you chose the easy description, right? Where you have talented people that want to do stuff and you want stuff done. Obviously, they go there. The hard part is when you have talented people that wants to do something entirely different. And in those cases, I mean, if it's somebody that I want to retain, then I'm going to make it happen within half a year, allowing someone to rotate to another team, taking an entirely different role, because they were good at the other stuff. Why wouldn't they be good at this? It's just code, and that's the trait we have, right? Everything else around it about how you I don't know, conduct yourself is mainly why we work with good people, right? And then you had another question that I wanted to go into, but I dropped it now.
It's all good. I was just asking about somebody's unhappy within your team, basically. They don't want to work on a certain project. They realize it's not for them. How do you go about keeping that person on side and keeping them happy?
I would definitely know that's going on very fast from a touch point. And then I would try to uncover the whys. Because let's say they know why they're doing it. They are have been with the company for quite a while. And then usually if somebody gets demotivated, it has a course. It's not just because they don't like doing JavaScript or whatever it is, right? They might not understand how important it is, but they also might have personal problems, or I might have under-delivered on a promise to work on their leadership skills or rotate them to another place. I think usually it's something that you can figure out, and sometimes you cannot, and they end up leaving the company. But if it's someone worth keeping, which generally people who you already hired are, then I would work really hard on figuring out how to mitigate the problem.
I can give an example that I think it depends, of course, what the topic is that they don't want to work on. But one, I think, recurrent thing that I have seen is very senior developers that have a lot of domain knowledge, that have been with the company a long time, end up being bogged down into support, into being asked a lot of questions, into being pulled into many directions and distracted from actual development work because they have the answers. And that is such a common pattern. And you start seeing that happening. And at the beginning, if you have the right people and they're nice and they just want to help, they want to be able to solve and help. But at some point, it will bite into their capacity to sit down and actually contribute to the larger project so much that it frustrates them. I think it's very important one to point out and to catch as early as possible, and to find ways to help them both say no and protect their own time, give them focus time, but also distribute this type of knowledge and distribute this type of work that is interrupting them a lot and changing their focus a lot throughout the day. A majority of the ones that I've worked with that go through this, they don't tell you early enough about it, because they feel guilty saying, oh, but I would like to do more development and I'm tired of half my day going into support related things and maintenance related things. So yeah, that's one that I don't think I have like one way to solve it, but I think it is one example of when people get very demotivated.
Yeah, I think definitely trying to uncover the why, as Rune said, is extremely important. I think in what has been useful for me is to come on the people management or people manager side or hat and try to default. I always first default on asking, is this something you're running away from, or is this something that you need to push through? or is this something that where are you? Where are you at on this? Because sometimes I tend to present the problem itself as an adversity that maybe can shape the professional or individual into their next level. So sometimes we need to embrace the adversity, because those actually are shaping us into becoming even more senior, or skilling ourselves up, or So I first have a tendency to try to put it in that way, to see, is it really something that you need to be away from, right? Or is it something that you need to embrace? And is this actually part of your next step to grow? And if the conversation goes in the way that, no, actually, this needs to be a change needs to happen here, then I agree, of course. Then is it a different area of business that you need to take care of, or is it the need of new technologies, or is it need or doing something different? I don't know. Then of course there's a lot of tools that we can use there, and the strategies. I tend to always go to the more like personal side of things first, and try to address, because sometimes we as humans, we don't want to be uncomfortable, right? So we tend to move away from any uncomfortable situation. So that's where I think we as managers need to be aware of that, and coach and assess our team members.
I think it's true. Both of you are like, but what Ligia is describing is a situation that creeps up on people, right? Suddenly you're a boiling frog, and you are swamped in support, and don't get to do what your passion is truly is, right? And then it's about all the usual stuff like well, automate your toil away, make sure it's documented well enough. Let's take it as a coaching opportunity. Why aren't you mentoring the juniors? And what Alberto is describing is also something where hopefully it's coming in advance. And then sometimes there just is boring work that needs to be done, right? And then like all the other things have been tried, you develop, you have a good relation. They'll tell you up front, I don't want to do it, but it's gotta be done. And in that case, I mean, yeah, you can reach for, let's do some compensation, or you take a day off, or then you get 20% time to get motivated. But when it comes down to it, sometimes there's this body of work that needs to be done. And here I think fairness is important in the organizations, large and small. If you see that other teams are also lifting their share, if you see that you're rotating the on-call duty, or okay, I did the notes last time. If people are perceiving the boring work as fairly distributed, they will step up. They're not like most rational and reasonable people that we hire will know, yeah, okay, sometimes I need to bring down the coffee cups. It's more the fact when it's always one person that can tick people off.
Yeah,
So.
it comes back to a really good point as well. Like you mentioned, it's about, again, transparency and letting people know that. But as well, and I think you were the one that mentioned this before, Frederik, is it depends on the level that you're at in your career. If you're a very junior engineer, it's quite difficult to explain to someone why the boring work is so important, because they haven't seen the downside of what happens if you don't do that important, boring work that nobody wants to do. Whereas someone with 5-6 years of experience has been there, they've probably seen situations where, I really don't fancy doing that, I'm just going to leave it. Everything goes up in flames, everything burns down. So they'll be like, right, well, I'm not letting that happen again. But if someone's 6 months into their career, they've not seen that happen before, they're like, well, that's boring, I don't want to do that. So, I'll leave it for someone else. And I guess sometimes maybe what you need is for it to happen to you and for it to all go wrong before you really see kind of what you need to do moving forwards and why it's so important. And that's happened to me. I've never written a line of code in myself, but it's happened to me in my career in other ways. So definitely something to keep in mind. I am just conscious of time. Has anybody got points that they want to raise, or any kind of things they want to bring up before we get wrapped up for the evening?
Yes, I have more words.
Please
Sorry.
do. No, don't apologize.
But sometimes the juniors have to be allowed to feel the pain, but you have to pick where you allow it, right? Because if it's something that's really gonna hurt us from an architectural point of view, then it's not cool. But usually you will be able to structure your workload and architecture so that it doesn't hurt everyone when it hurts, and they will feel that it's not that fun to do on call on a Friday evening and maybe on a Saturday, and then that might be a lesson learned. At least I would hope that. But the other one I wanted to get back to that we've been circling on here is the example that Ligia came with the burned out. It doesn't have to be a senior. It can be just a key player that knows everything. And I've also had that situation a couple of times where I've caught it too late. I've been able to mitigate it, but I would like your insights on how you spot it, because I myself like to take a lot of responsibility and get shit done. And I'm old enough to know when I need to let something go or delegate it, or just, this is not important now. They will complain again later if it actually was important. But some people are not there yet, and they will end up in the situation where they are so burned out that it actually takes 3-6 months of time to get back. And I would really like to avoid that blunder in the future. So I would like to dwell a little bit on that and ask the question on how do you guys spot it?
Okay, one-on-ones are definitely a place where you get to dive into some of the personal stuff, but I think you don't spot it as much in one-on-ones, but in the behavior of the people in the team throughout dailies, throughout other sessions that you have with the team. And you can see if their velocity, their output is suffering from it. You can tell when all their updates of what they're actually doing is stuff that wasn't there before, or like there's too much of it. It becomes very obvious very quickly, at least to me, but it's not always the case, of course. But when it comes to a contributor that has been solidly contributing to big projects in the team and so on, and out of a sudden they don't seem to get anything out, they seem to just, oh, there was this incident and this other incident, and I spent the whole day dealing with this and that, and it happens so often, and it sacrifices how much they can actually contribute to some of the other projects that you're working on. It starts becoming obvious through their daily stuff that they talk about. It becomes like the same monologue of talking about the same thing over and over again, and you can figure it out in a week or two that they're stuck with that, and then you bring it up in a one-on-one. Is this something that is new? Is this because of some release that went badly, and of course it's a temporary thing? Is this happening for a while? How do you feel about it? But in my case, in both cases that I've seen this, I was new as a manager in the team, so I was kind of just joined, and then I saw this situation, so I was trying to understand how long it's been going on and what I can do to help and what has been tried already and so on. So I don't have the longer term thing that you mentioned.
In our case, we had a case, I think 1 year and a half ago, where one of our developers went or got burned out and had to go in a few weeks on a leave. Then we were asking ourselves in the management team, could we have spotted this before, right? Could we have prevented this? Are people feeling free to tell us this? And so we started something there, because we end up also acknowledging that it's not only the company, but it's also the individual that needs to be aware and needs to speak up in terms of, sometimes it's not necessarily the company or the project putting the pressure on the person, but it's just a person wanting to achieve something that they don't realize that they are coming into a situation when they find themselves overwhelmed, and it's not even their managers or the company, it's just themselves doing this. We actually had that conversation with that individual, but the important thing here is that after that, we actually started a process in the company where us as managers, we decided to, in each one-on-one every month, the first questions we would ask is, hey, how are your levels of stress? Then doing also anonymous surveys through the HR people department, where we can also try to catch those. And also, of course, in the different levels of feedback, as in retrospectives of teams and so on. So we made it more intentional to actually ask them, not only wait until they can tell us. But one thing that I find very important is the ability of us as managers to be able to sit and receive uncomfortable feedback from our teams. You know, like being able to just sit there and let them get it out of the chest, let them tell us everything that they feel we're not doing well, and sit there. And some things are right that they are saying, some things that cannot change. They're not necessarily right all the time, right? But it's just the fact that we as managers can create that space when they feel free to say what they need to say. And I believe that that's the huge step into creating a space where they can feel that they can actually raise a hand and say, hey, I'm starting to feel a little too overwhelmed. And then we can also, it can help us spot that in advance. So that's just one thing. We have not had a case like that after this individual. Although recently I actually got the feedback that one of our teams is actually starting to feel, hey, we feel really pressured, we feel really stressed. I'm glad to be able to listen to these things, and we are, of course, trying to address that as much as we can at the moment.
I think it's a very difficult question, Rune. I think it's very difficult. It's one of the hardest things as a manager. You have these passionate individuals who hopefully are really passionate about what they're doing, right? They have opinions and it means something to them. It matters something. And distinguishing this from, hey, you need to cool down. You need to take it less serious. You need to go home and watch Netflix or something. It's hard to distinguish when you have really passionate people. We have very low churn, high retention rate in Dalux. We are around, I don't know, 250 in development now. We still, of course, we have people who quit for various reasons, and some of them could have been prevented. What surprised me, I'm sad to say, is how little warning you get sometimes. Like they post something as a problem, and then like, okay, we have a few months to fix that, and then 2 weeks later, it's like, okay, it's over the top, right? You have surprisingly little warning sometimes. So what I want is as much signal as possible. Signal from the person with check-ins and one-on-ones. I'm explicit, say, part of my job is to help you, make sure you're happy and all this. Like really pull it out of them sometimes. They're not, might be the most extroverted perhaps people. So that's part of the signal. The other part of the signal is feedback culture, where it's okay to say, hey, I think this guy, this lady over there is she's working over hours. She's it's been frustrating. She's acting out during lunch or whatever happens. Like it's gotta be okay to say that these people are pressured. So all the signal we can get, we need it, because it can be very difficult to spot.
I feel like we need to be psychologists, or need some psychology training at some point, because it's also about, I mean, you mentioned the thing with the 2 weeks warning only. I bet with you at least half those times that the person didn't realize it until they realized it. And it's like you need to have like psychological training to start being able to pull this information out. And so that's also like, I think, boundaries for ourselves as managers, how much of this work we are putting into it. It's great, and we have to do it, and we have to keep an eye on how people are doing, but it has to come from them as well, because I don't want to be a psychologist. I'm not doing this job to do therapy for people during one-on-ones. At the same time, I want to be there for them, and I want to be able to understand these things. So it's kind of like, where do you put this limit? It's really hard.
It's about setting some expectations, right? I like to tell people that you can complain to your friend or your wife or the teammate or your team lead. You can complain to the CTO and CEO. If you find them at the coffee machine, you can complain everywhere that it feels good. But I'm responsible for you, for your well-being. It's in my job description. I'm being paid to make sure that you are thriving here. So I hope you also complain to me. Yeah, that's really important to have that relation with the person, right? It's all the hope we have of spotting things like Rune describes.
hopefully that's helped a little bit. I know it's a tough one to crack, right? But hopefully some fresh perspectives. Oh, you're on mute, sorry.
Sorry, I had my focus in my notes. There were a couple of spot-on observations, like both of these individuals were highly passionate, to some degree acting as my extension down in the tech stack. And of course, at some point, they also, besides taking a lot of responsibility and doing a lot of stuff that needs to be done, other people start to rely on them. And that's when the trap kind of closes, that there is some informal processes that works and keeps working and we all enjoy it, until at some point we don't anymore. And then this happens. And then it has been hard for me to sort it out afterwards. So I need to, I mean, now I have a pattern, and it actually helped just talking a little bit about it. I see what I could have done different here. Yeah.
It's a little learning curve, isn't it? It doesn't matter, how long you spend as a leader or how far into your development career you are. There's always things that you're going to pick up on, right? And things that are changing. And I think the point that Frederik raised as well about that being the way that people are. I always, in my mind, I always try and relate things back to sport or football. That's just how my brain works. It's like if you have a player who's incredible and they're really good at everything, but every 7 or 8 games they go in with a flying tackle because they're overly aggressive and they're overly passionate, but that's what makes them good footballer. Sometimes you just have to accept that some people are going to have that side to them, and that's what makes them as good as they are or what they are, but it's going to be a downside at times. And like I say, being able to manage that and being able to spot something like that before it becomes an issue and they end up leaving or whatever it may be is really, really tough. But I really appreciate everyone's time this evening. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I've personally got a lot from it, but more importantly, I hope you all have as well. Everyone's been really actively involved, which has been great to see. So massively appreciative of all your times after a busy day at work. So thank you all so much, and we'll obviously all stay in touch and hopefully speak all again soon.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you,
Sure.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you later.